let me get this to, here we go. Sorry, speakers, 45 Creeper Hill Road. Scott Morrison.
Yes, here.
Thank you. Okay, so the open meeting of the Conservation Commission is being conducted remotely via Zoom pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order as extended on June 15th, 2021, with the governor signing of Senate Bill 2475, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. Access information for the public has been provided on the town's website. Please note that this meeting is being recorded. Please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking. If you're not using a dial-in by telephone feature, you can mute yourself by pressing *6. As chair, I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. Please note that you will not have the screen sharing privileges, but staff can display any visuals per your cue. After speakers conclude their remarks, I will invite each commissioner by name to provide any comments, questions, or motions. After the commissioners have spoken, I will allow public comments to be spoken by participants. Participants must use the raise hand feature by clicking on the hand icon at the bottom right of the Zoom menu bar to indicate they would like to speak. If you are using the dial in by telephone feature, please press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute when you're called on. Participants who raise their hand will be recognized one at a time by their name and then will be promoted to speak. Public comments will be followed by commission and applicant responses. Finally, each vote will be conducted by a roll call vote. As a reminder, the commission is concerned with the state and town wetlands and stormwater regulation concerns outside of this purview need to be addressed to the appropriate boards. For example, road conditions must be addressed with the select board and traffic concerns must be addressed with the planning board. Okay, seeing it's 7:07. I think the only action item we have are the meeting minutes, Leah?
Correct.
Okay. Does anyone have any comments or corrections on the October 19th meeting minutes? So seeing none, I'll go around real quick just to do the roll call. Jonathan,
No comments. Look good.
Alicia,
No comments.
and Betsy.
No comments.
Do I have a motion to approve the October 19th, 2021 meeting minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the October 19th meeting minutes.
Do I have a second?
Second the motion to approve the October 19th meeting minutes.
I have a motion and a second. We will go through a roll call vote. So Jonathan,
Yes.
Alicia,
Yes.
and Betsy.
Yes.
I am also a yes, the motion carries. All right. Is there anything else you need to update us on, Leah, since we have 7 minutes to our public hearing?
I mean, I gave you guys most of those updates last time. I guess beyond last time, mowing of the fields is complete. We checked property number 4 today. So 4 of 4, the mowing has happened with the brush hog. DPW likes it a lot. I think it looks great. So
Yeah,
that was a great investment.
Great, because I have to take a walk on Sunday out at Pell Farm, and it looked really nice. Yeah, so.
And I think I told you guys at the last one that our CPC application for used to be 93, now it's 95 North Street, the old Ingval Orchard. Our CPC application passed at town meeting. So we're going to be looking for a landscape architect to help design that property for passive recreation.
Yeah. So what's happening to all those Christmas trees they used to grow? They're just overgrown?
At the Ingval property?
Yeah, I know they say it was an orchard, but it was used as a Christmas tree farm for years. I'm only a few houses down the road, and that's where we used to go tag or chop our trees.
So I did a walk out there, maybe over a year, maybe 2 years ago. before COVID, with the recreation director when we were scoping out if we were interested in the property. And I don't remember too many Christmas trees, to be honest.
Yeah, I wonder if they cleared them or took them down.
There was a lot of bittersweet, I can tell you that.
Yeah. But I would say it was about 2 acres of Christmas trees there. The young ones being up front and then bigger as you went farther back. Makes me a little sad.
Yeah, so as far as the RFP for the LA or for the kind of conceptual plans and so forth, who's pulling that together?
So Jen and I have a meeting with William Blake, who is kind of in charge of procurement and things like that at the
Okay.
town level. So we have a meeting with him to start picking through that process and what it looks like and who's going to do what.
Okay, so yeah, if you want to, just because I'm on the other side, I see a lot of RFPs. And so as far as scoping it and being and having a good scope, and I'm sure Jonathan's got some background in looking at RFPs. If you want us to take a look at it, it'll be less about the procurement part of it and more about making sure the scope is tight so
Okay.
that we get the more vague the scope, the more varied the prices. And then I know you have a certain amount, so that's kind of another, there's 2 different ways of doing it, is scoping it with a fixed fee, or there's scoping it with getting people to submit their fee. So it's kind of making sure the scoping is correct.
Okay, so when we have a draft, send that over to you guys.
That I would appreciate that. And I don't know if Betsy and Alicia would like to take a look at it, but it would be
Sure.
good. So,
Okay.
I can definitely take a look at it. I've done a number of landscaping projects and site work projects all over the state, so we can at least vet it out to make sure it looks right, and we can talk about add alternates or whatever we need to do for, budget control and that type of thing.
yep.
Okay.
Well, that,
Yeah, I know. I get to look at lots of RFPs. So,
We did have some questions that get pretty specific, but I know, Sandy, I know you had talked about that maybe we can work with some students from like the Conway School
Yep.
to help with the project. So then I wasn't sure how you kind of write that in or write that out of
no,
this.
that's kind of, that's something you want to, with your procurement officer or whatever his title is to talk about that. If you were to go with like the Conway School, or there's probably some other schools that can do the same thing. If you do that, it's a little bit different fee structure. So that's, that's something to discuss with them. Obviously, the intent of doing that is you get, a little bit more bang for your buck, but you're not going with, you're not always going with the most seasoned folks, because you're just really relying on whoever the professor or instructor is doing that, where that's a
Okay.
very different setup than with going with a professional landscape architect consulting firm.
Is that still a paid service if you
Yes,
go
it's-
that? Okay.
It's typically well, you'd have to check. It depends upon who you use and so forth. A lot of times it's like a fixed fee type of thing. And sometimes it's even just a master's, program where actually they're looking for those things and it's not paid. So they usually the fixed fee part of it's got more to do with the professors and so forth. But you need to check with the details for each place that you do it. So as an example, our company, we use WPI students to do research projects for us. So we have a flat fee that we pay them. But the students aren't getting paid. It's really just the administration of that from the staff, because they use, the WPI labs and everything else. So there's a lot, you get a huge bang for the buck on that particular for research projects. So
Okay.
good look at that. 7:14.
I wish this meeting was in person so I could have brought all sorts of Halloween candy from my house.
Oh, I'm so happy it's not in
We're
person.
so happy you did not do that, Jonathan. In our 60 seconds, Jonathan, at one point, maybe we could have an offline. I had my first Quinsigamon Commission meeting the
Okay.
other day.
Yep.
And I just need to know what I should be reporting to them from our commission and what you want to hear from those meetings.
Usually my reports were when we were working on a couple of the CPC funding things, I had reports, but most of the time I wouldn't have a report.
Okay.
I don't know the lake. I don't
I
see
felt
much.
like a deer in the headlights when I saw commissioners' reports.
Yeah,
And
normally that was just like no report this week or this
Okay.
month.
okay, good to know.
It's an acceptable thing to just say I'm good. But if you see something, or if you're involved in something, or if we're talking something Lake Quinsigamon, it's fair game to
Yeah,
bring it up.
that's what I was thinking it was limited to, but I just wanted to make sure I didn't totally embarrass myself.
Nope. I was the same way. I started and I'm like, I don't have a report, and they're like, that's fine. I'm like, okay.
Listen, you're a volunteer. That's okay. You're there.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
All right, seeing that it is 7:15, pursuant to the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act, the Grafton Wetlands Protection Bylaw, the Grafton Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing to act upon a notice of intent application for Grafton Wetlands Protection Bylaw permit for the construction of a single-family house at 45 Creeper Hill Road in Grafton. So, Mr. Morrison, you've got the floor to go through what you are going to present.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Just for the record, Scott Morrison, the applicant in this particular project. I'm in the process. I've got a purchase and sales agreement that through November, so I'm trying to get this thing permitted through the Conservation Commission prior to the closing of this particular property. Just to kind of get started, if you look in the left-hand corner, it's Creeper Hill Road. There's an area of bordering vegetated wetland in I guess it's the western portion or the bottom portion of the lot here. There is essentially there's some drainage that comes off of Creeper Hill Road, and if you look where there's the driveway kind of crosses, there's some proposed culverts, and extending further along the upper property line, there's a drainage swale and kind of a drainage ditch that takes all that water all that runoff from Creeper Hill Road, drains behind the houses and then across this property. So it's my understanding that historically the commission likes to identify those areas and ensure that it's incorporated, to ensure that the drainage continues, everything's stabilized and the drainage continues to flow where it's proposed to flow, but wouldn't be an intermittent stream because it doesn't drain a wetland. So, and then the kind of the third resource area, if you look, there's a dark dashed line. I think it's elevation 362. So there's bordering land subject to flooding that traverses across the property. There's no impacts to bordering vegetated wetland. There are some impacts to bordering land subject to flooding, right where the driveway comes in off Creeper Hill Road. So because of that, required to meet compensatory flood storage requirements. So there's a detail, if you look in the bottom left-hand corner, the engineers provided a copy of the details with the flood elevations and what's filled and what's proposed to be excavated out to create a similar volume, or actually in this particular case, and all those incremental elevations, there'll actually be an increase in flood storage. The driveway will come in, kind of bisect across this property. There's actually a driveway easement on the adjacent property. So by using that driveway easement, I'm able to kind of push that driveway further from the wetland and kind of minimize the impacts to bordering land subject to flooding by allowing that driveway to go within that easement. And then it kind of wraps around. There's a garage that the neighbor has, so I'm trying to avoid that, kind of swing it through to access the buildable upland in the back portion of the property. There are a couple culverts, two 12-inch culverts proposed, so that's, as I said before, that storm runoff that comes back behind these houses can pass through unimpeded through the proposed driveway. And then the house will be in the back, kind of set back off the road. The other thing I didn't mention was, so when we're providing the compensatory flood storage, I provided some details. So that area, it's currently vegetated with like multi-floor rose and garlic mustard and a bunch of invasives. So the plan would be to remove those, do the excavation work, install new topsoil, and actually plant that with red maple, gray birch saplings. And I've identified about 30 shrubs that will be planted through there. So that area will be restored with native wetland vegetation or native buffer zone type wetland vegetation through there. The project will be serviced via municipal water, municipal sewer, which will extend and tie into the services within the street. The sewer is actually there's a pump station across the street, so the sewer will have to discharge to a manhole before it enters the sewer pump station, but that's located across the street. I guess lastly, erosion control is proposed surrounding the project. Consists of silt fence and straw bales or straw wattles. I think the preference would probably be to use straw wattles and the silt fence. There's minimal excavation work. Most of the work involved consists of some fill coming in off the road and then construction of the driveway and some minimal grading around the proposed house. I think that pretty much summarizes the project. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the commission may have.
Sure, I'll go around around to the commissioners and see if they have any questions. I've got a few, but Alicia, any questions?
Nothing at the moment.
Jonathan,
Nothing at the moment.
and Betsy.
Not right now.
So I have some just clarifying questions for you. So on the driveway coming in, this kind of, kind of a right-hand turn, left-hand turn, right-hand turn. And as you get closer to the house, when I start looking at the grading, I can't quite see, it looks like you either have a riprap slope or something going on near wetland flag 815.
Yep, that's actually B15, but yes, there's
Okay.
some riprap along that slope there.
Okay. And that's just to tighten up the slope.
Yes, tighten up the slope, but because there's a couple proposed culverts going through there.
Right. And so then so when you're looking at that wetlands, you're doing a crossing of that wetlands with a driveway.
Yeah, but like I said, it's, I guess the wetland would be the drainage channel coming from stormwater coming in off the street. So it's my understanding that, it wouldn't be an intermittent stream because it doesn't drain a wetland. Be regulated, I guess. It's my understanding that based upon, other similar projects and discussions with other consultants that the commission just, doesn't regulate it per se, but simply just ensures that any flows continue to flow through that area and make sure that you're not blocking and flooding the neighbor or something like that.
So Leah, this is just kind of the drainage path that we have on the local bylaw, and those are bank flags.
So it would be jurisdictional under the bylaw.
Right.
By B, when you said B15, did you intend it to be B for bank, or that's just a coincidence?
No, it's just, it was flagged to the B and C series flags. It had been, somebody else had flagged it previously, so with an A series. So rather than confuse things, we just used just different series, I guess.
Yeah, and I would agree with you, and Leah, you can kind of chime in, is that obviously the reason why we identified flow path for water is just that if something was put it in its way, i.e. a driveway, that a culvert goes in so that we can maintain the flow paths and that we don't create issues or change the hydrology in any great extent. So, okay. And so it's a 10-foot wide driveway coming in. And then your house is shown, you have no decks, no porches, no nothing. Are you gonna, is this just a generic house you're putting in for now and we'll have, other things coming off the house in the future? Or what are you trying to do here?
Yeah, like I said, I just want to make sure that it's buildable before I actually buy the property.
Yeah.
So I essentially just put the house location. I haven't gone and done any design work or anything. So if, for instance, the house shape or something changed, or if I decided to put a deck on the house or something, I'd certainly have to come back and obtain approval from the commission.
And that's fine. I just want to make sure that you're aware of that. I mean, I don't, this is your application. So the kind of the configuration of the house is what, we look at to approve and so forth.
No, that's a very good question. I appreciate that.
Okay. So one of the things that I was having a little bit hard time picking up on was the 25-foot no disturb zone. So some of it's fairly straightforward. So that's right there.
Yep.
Okay. And that's the driveway and then you also have that 25-foot to the flow path.
Yeah, he put the 25 off the flow path. I'm not sure that the commission's ever regulated that, but I figured, we'll just submit it and there's no harm staying out of that.
Right. So Leah, that we don't typically do it the 25-foot off the flow path, correct?
Correct, but it is going into the driveway here, so I had mentioned that he'll need a waiver request for that.
Right. And just the fact that, just a quick question. When was this lot created?
I believe 1986,
Okay.
so it's old.
Okay. Hey, that's after I was born. That's not that old.
Not long before I was born, so I'm in the same boat.
And the reason why I'm asking is just, there's an upland requirement that we have in the bylaw or in the zoning. Leah, is that any issue on this lot here?
So that's something that we had started that conversation when he filed the RDA that has since been withdrawn, but he is still seeking a waiver request for that contiguous upland requirement.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, if you give me 1 second, I think I can give you the calculations.
The lot fell into like a subcategory that the way we wrote that section, it didn't explicitly cover this lot.
Hold on 1 second here. I know I listed that. I'm just trying to figure out exactly where in the notice of intent application that was listed.
So as Scott kind of looks for that, Leah, do you want to kind of go through with your comments?
Sure. So Scott had mentioned the section of 310 CMR 10.53 that talks about the crossing being necessary to site the house on the upland. However, I had a question, is that, and we have a section in our regulations that mirrors that as well. But my question was, is the citation under the Wetlands Protection Act regulations even relevant if what he's crossing isn't jurisdictional under the act, then are we only citing it as a limited project for the bylaw's sake?
So good question, because so Scott, what your driveway wasn't originally going to be on the abutters lot, correct? Or was it always in that location?
It was always at that,
Okay,
well, because there's an easement, so and to minimize impacts, I figured, might as well use that easement. I think it was granted to intend to avoid wetland impacts.
right. Yeah, no, that's what I'm getting to, is that I think, yeah, because you're not crossing a wetlands to get to the upland because you've acquired an easement on the abutting lot to avoid that.
Correct.
So from a state perspective, I don't think we fall under it.
Okay,
I guess
Uh,
arguably it's because, there's an impact to BLSF. So you're not crossing bordering vegetated wetland, but you're crossing bordering land.
Quote, a resource area.
Correct.
And that's because you're in a part of it, you're in the corner of it. But to be conservative, that's not a bad approach. But you are compensating for that because the bordering land subject flooding is a little bit different. And to be quite honest, I'd have to look up the limited project and actually look up the resource areas it applies to. And if it, yeah,
Yeah, because, the limited project provision is intended for projects that don't fully comply with, the Wetlands Protection Act. So for instance, if you have fillings, 10,000 square feet of
Correct.
bordering vegetated wetland. But in this particular instance, the project fully complies with the bordering land subject to flooding standards. So you don't necessarily have to invoke limited project, but I've seen cases where being criticized for not indicating that it's limited project. So it's like a flip of the coin. Some commissions suggest you file it as limited project. Some commissions don't.
I'm probably right in the middle on that one. I don't think, because it has no real material impact on this particular design. And on this submission, the application, because we're not talking about, going over the 5,000 or anything else. So, it's your submission. I'm not gonna, I don't know, Flea, if you have any kind of comment on that.
I was just leaning towards citing it from the bylaw side because of that drainage path being bylaw jurisdictional, but
Okay.
I just was looking for clarification on the state side.
If we cite it, it doesn't really, I'm just trying to think, it doesn't have an impact on what we do
Yeah,
for conditions or anything else, because as far as the bordering land subject to flooding, that standard is being met by the compensation.
correct.
All right. Did you happen to find that, Scott, or did you?
Yes, I did. So there's 26,419 square feet of upland where the house is proposed. So that side of the wetland. But if you do, the total upland on the site is 36,612 square feet. So it's kind of a gray area, because if you consider that flow path as a split, the lot doesn't comply and needs a waiver. However, if you can combine the area of upland on both sides of that flow path, we're over the 30,000 square feet. We're at 36,612 square feet, so I wouldn't need a waiver. So I guess conservatively asking for a waiver is a reasonable request, but it's up to the commission whether I need it or not.
So you really want to have all these sorts of unusual first-time questions on us, don't you?
I am
Um,
I'm not trying to make it difficult on you.
Oh, it's not difficult. It's just, new questions. We have granted this waiver previously, and that is usually based on the proposed project in the area and what's around it. Every kind of waiver is looked at independently. Your question is really, is a waiver even required based on what our interpretation of our local bylaw is based on that flow path?
Correct. But I've asked for the waiver, so I guess, I think I'm covered. It's just a matter of how the commission interprets it.
Okay.
Whether you want to simply grant a waiver or make the decision that a waiver is not required.
Leah, have you thought about that?
I have not given that one much thought.
I would be inclined, based on all the circumstances and how unique this lot is that we would just grant the waiver and not make an interpretation of the two sides, just so that it applies to this site because it's unusual and so, but it also gives the waiver, so. And we'll go around to everyone else and get other folks' feedback, so. See now, your other report comments?
Okay, so we also started talking in the prior hearing about bordering land subject to flooding and setting the flood elevation at 362.
Yep.
Because there was a mapping error with FEMA.
Yep.
So like I said, that application's been withdrawn, but at that prior hearing, we were heading towards agreeing with that. So we need to circle back on whether we find that reasonable still.
Yeah, I don't have an issue with that assertion. Alicia? And if you have any questions, like how did that elevation come up, we can go through that again too. You're still on
Oh.
mute. Yep.
Sorry, yep. Yeah, nope, that sounds reasonable to me. I checked out the maps that were in the folder.
Okay. Jonathan, any kind of your comments on that assumption?
That sounds reasonable to me as well.
Okay. And Betsy?
Same, it seems reasonable.
Okay. Yeah, so I don't have an issue. We just, in our findings, Leah, we want to make sure we're clear that we're not establishing that as a, that we're establishing that as a floodplain elevation, simply because we're not going to be issuing anything that would change it. We are just, agreeing with that elevation for the use, or for as it applies to the wetlands and as it regulations in our local bylaw. That's all that we're approving it for, is for use at that. We're not saying anything out, so no one else on an abutting lot can use the same thing. We're saying for this lot, it is a reasonable assertion. So.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just writing that down.
Yep. And that kind of goes to your next comment on your report about need to update flood zone status with FEMA.
Right. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I'm just looking down at your comments, your next comment on the storage and the calculations.
Yep.
So you've got it's broken out, by foot, which is what the regulations require. But all you have is the results of that. Did the engineer who performed this have any other graphics or calculations with that to show backup to those numbers?
I think he just simply calculated it based upon the elevations within where he provided the proposed grading.
Okay. Yeah, typically there's some sort of backup of like an area calc or something to show this is the area of quote fill, and these are, this is the compensation. there's a bunch of different ways to do it. It's usually just done it foot by foot, but usually there's a calc sheet that's with it. So it's kind of to see something as basic as this, I'd be looking for a little bit more backup because he had to do some calculations to come up with these numbers.
Yeah, I think he just calculated, the limit of fill and then how much surface area there was at each one of those incremental elevations.
Right.
And then just simply provided that for the compensatory flood storage area and made sure that those numbers, provided additional storage.
I guess all the times I've ever done this, I've included some sort of graphic and calc sheet that actually shows how it was done. I understand how they do it, but by looking at this, yeah, it's just usually it's not like it's a high level computation or anything. It's just areas and so forth and the depths, but I don't know, Leah, have we gotten, typically we get a little bit more information on the compensation areas.
Yes, and I was just wanting to clarify the area where it's being filled. Does that exactly correspond to your cross hatching here? Is it on both sides? It's not
Oh, it would
exactly
be
called
from the
out.
cross hatching back to that dash line. So kind of going right through the middle of the driveway. So that's the area that's this proposed fill.
Okay,
So from I guess if you're looking at that sheet, the bottom portion of that crosshatch is the limit of fill, and it extends up towards that to that dash line.
this one.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so typically you kind of look at typically what, all the engineers do it differently. You can do sections, you can do just a color coded to say this is the limit of fill. Here's each elevation. There's like this, it's really just a way to show what what you actually calculated. Like what's the limit of calculations versus, yeah, here's the fill, here's the cut. This is where it is. It's helpful when you say between these two elevations, it's 106 cubic feet. Not that I'm disputing that. It'd be nice to have a line or a shaded area that says this is it. So you can see it, so you can check it. Otherwise, whoever does the checking is just assuming where those limits are and not looking at what the calculation is based on.
Okay.
So, I mean, I don't think it's heavy lifting at all. You'd have to do it anyways to calc it. So,
Right.
and doing it by hand is fine. You don't need to do it, using surfaces or anything. Doing it by hand is absolutely fine for something this small. That makes total sense. And you're talking, 3 foot increments. And so it should be fairly straightforward. It's just like, what are those areas? That's all you're really looking for.
Yeah,
So
I'm
no one's-
guessing it's probably 5 minutes and 3 colored pencils.
Pretty much, but then everyone knows, and it's in the record that these are the areas we're talking about.
Yep.
And stuff. So I don't think it's not a big deal. It's just the lack of it kind of, that's all.
Okay.
So for clarification, you want it shown where on the plan and then the math.
They can actually even do it on like an 8.5 by 11 and just color it up to say, this is the limit of each areas that's being filled. And this is the limit that's a cut. And it can be as simple as that. We're not just looking to define the areas that we used in the calculation.
Yep.
Yeah, and I wouldn't worry about adding it to this plan because you just kind of, to me, it's a calc backup as opposed to having it on the plan.
Okay. I think I could probably sketch that up and send it over to the engineer and just have him calc it, pretty it up for you.
Yeah, I don't think it's a heavy lift. Again, it's just providing the backup for the calculations. That's all. So that was your question on that. And then the whole going back to Hovey Pond versus Quinsigamond River.
Yeah, so I'm gonna stop sharing for a second because I gotta pull up something else. So give me 1 second. Okay, so we started this, whoops, sorry, we started this conversation last time. Scott was seeking a determination last time about whether he's dealing with Hovey Pond or he was looking for confirmation that he's looking at Hovey Pond. The dot here is his site. To my knowledge, it would be a river because we're on USGS and it's a river on either side. He provided one of the maps from, I think it was 82. And it's not called out as Quinsigamond River on either side. I also have, I'm gonna switch materials here one more time. Went out and grabbed a photo today if the commission finds it helpful. So the site would be to the left here.
Yep.
We did try to go the route of maybe getting peer review to figure out riverfront or not riverfront here. We've been having some trouble with peer review on this one. We've sent out for 3 quotes. One came back really high. One came back too busy to take on the
Yep.
job, and the third hasn't responded. So I did want to ask the commission your thoughts and how you'd like to proceed.
So let me ask a different question. On the site, so basically, everything within this site is it would be within riverfront if that was determined and established as riverfront. The amount of area being disturbed, is that less than 5,000 square feet?
I think we're over the 5,000 square feet, but because even if you do determine it to be a perennial stream and we do the 200-foot riverfront area, keep in mind that the lot was created in 1986. So regardless of river or not river, you know, the riverfront regulations indicate that the commission shall allow the construction of a single family house. So if the commission determines that it's riverfront area, we add a line on the plan and call it riverfront area.
Right. That's kind of where my question was heading, because even if it is a river, that it would still be, there's still provisions to allow a house to be built. It's also 5,000 or 10% of whatever the area of the lot that's in riverfront. I don't know how large the lot is.
Yeah, it's 2.6 acres. So you've got, you know, your 10% well in excess of 10,000 square feet of impact. So my guess is the project's probably below that 10% threshold anyway.
Right. And what I'm looking for is just different ways, in multiple ways, to make sure that as this moves forward, that we're, you know, as far as the local bylaw, we have a lot of jurisdictional control of that, but I want to make sure as far as the riverfront goes in the state, and this will go to the state, that we've addressed it. So there's no issues on that side. That's all.
Yeah. And essentially, I think I asked in the RDA because, you know, I'm looking at the USGS map. It's labeled as Hovey Pond, but I'm standing on the bridge looking at it and like,
You can see the flow paths. You can see the flow, and I mean, all I would do is drop a leaf in there and watch it go downstream, and that's pretty much, yeah.
and I'm not going to argue that you're wrong.
But again, if you're doing 10% of the riverfront, you're almost 30,000 square feet. If you take 2.6 acres.
Right. So there's just barely more than that of upland on the site. So they're nowhere near that 10% threshold.
So, and again, anything that we do moving forward, I want to just make sure that we're meeting the regulations, and how, it's more about making a decision on that, making it based on what the requirements are in writing, in order of conditions that address the findings and so forth. So Leah, I mean, when you look at the characteristics of a river, there's a bunch of different ways you can tell between that and a pond. The easiest one is flow. And if you can have observable flow, it's going to be, it's a river. And when you were reaching out to peer reviewers, were you reaching out to different wetlands folks, or who was it that you were reaching out to?
Yeah, it was for wetland peer review, just to back up or confirm what was
Okay.
jurisdictional and what was not.
I think it's pretty clear. I don't know, Scott, it's really up to you. I mean, first glance in the evidence that we have, I would, say that it's a river, just based on the flow. And is there anything else as far as the extent of the wetlands that needs to be checked, Leah? From a peer review standpoint for a single family home?
I mean, we've walked through most of the other questions. It was just this sort of list of questions we haven't seen before, combined with, pond versus river and things like
Okay.
that was the reason that I was trying to go that route. But if we can take care of it all here, that's acceptable to me too.
Yeah, and I think just based on the evidence of your site visit, based on the USGS map and other different maps and so forth, I think it's a pretty safe bet to call it a river. And I don't think it prevents this house being constructed. So that's a different question and a different thing that we need to do. To me, it's about the findings. So we've talked a lot, so I'm just gonna go through the commission to see if anyone else has any questions or has any other comments about looking at the information that we have, and determination that it's a regulatory, it's a river. So Alicia?
Nope, no questions. It looks like a river to me based off all the pictures and the maps.
Jonathan
Same comment.
and Betsy?
Like a river to me.
Okay. All right, so as far as what's left, so if we do make the determination, that's a river. And then I just, having, getting 3 quotes for peer review and having one of them come back $1,800 for the applicant to spend on something that's appears very obvious. I'll leave it to you, Scott, if you want to have a wetlands person come out and confirm that it's a river.
I prefer not, put it this way, it's $1,800 I prefer not to spend, and I don't think I can make any argument that I disagree with the commission's thoughts and process of determining that it's a river. So I think everybody's in agreement here.
All right, great. Thank you. Your other kind of comments, Leah, about waivers. Even though I think you could argue.
Actually, I actually
go
have a
ahead.
question before you move to waivers.
Yep.
So in talking about the date the lot was created versus the riverfront regulations, but we do agree it's a river, and so the lines will still be added to the plan. Does he need to step through the alternatives analysis exercise, or the date on the lot exempts him from that?
If you want, I can provide a summary to that, just essentially detailing when the lot was created and what the requirements are.
That would be very helpful.
Okay.
Okay, you can go back to waivers.
So the first one is the bylaw about the contiguous, yeah, whatever. The upland requirement. And so one of them is a waiver, and then Leah, you noted a fee was paid on the RDA, but that was withdrawn.
Correct.
What is the fee on that?
Waiver request is 50, so I just didn't know if the commission counts the 50 from before having then been withdrawn, or does he need to pay the 50 again now because it's requested now?
I think he's already paid for that waiver the first time. I'm
Okay.
fine. I'm fine with that. Does Alicia any agree?
I agree.
Jonathan
Agree.
and Betsy?
I agree.
Okay. And then as far as from the 25-foot no disturb, which is probably the next topic that we should talk about. And that also requires a waiver and needs to be requested and paid for. So let's just talk about work within the 25-foot zone. You know, even if you don't follow what's shown on the plan, you might want to have the 25-foot offset revised to show it just off the BVW and not off the flow path.
Yep.
You are still doing work in the 25-foot. Basically with the driveway and the location of the wetlands, you know, it's again, site by site, there's no alternative. So I'll go around real quick. Does anyone have any comments or questions on this? Or so Alicia,
Nope, no additional comments or questions.
Jonathan,
Nothing.
and Betsy?
No additional questions.
Okay. Is there anything else for that, Leah?
No.
Okay. And then you just had a couple of comments on the plan revisions about the proposed tree line label. And then information on staging and stockpiling areas.
Correct. I already let Scott know of those and they're forthcoming.
Okay. All right, and then you indicated there's an abutter concern about the driveway culvert.
Yeah, they might be the attendee. Let me go back and check.
Okay,
I think they are, and I did get a public comment in my inbox about like 6:20 tonight. I didn't have time to upload it, but I did receive it.
okay. So I'll kind of go around once more, see if there's any other questions we can open up to the public. So Scott, any other questions or comments before we just go around quickly, then we'll open up to the public.
No, that's good. I just wanted to kind of summarize after we're done exactly what I need to show on the plans, but you can continue and open it
Okay.
up to the public.
So around quickly, Betsy, anything else before we go to the public?
No, nothing else.
Jonathan? And Alicia?
Nope, nothing else.
Okay. So then I'll let attendees here who have any comments or questions about this particular project, please raise your hand, feel free. And if you happen to have already submitted a comment or a concern, please feel free to raise your hand and we'll actually add you as a participant and you'll be able to speak. So you got your hand raised. Very good. I was looking for that damn hand at a call last night and I couldn't find it. So nice job on that. And Leah's taking care of the rest.
Yep, we should be able to hear them now.
So if you could give your name and address and then just please go ahead and ask the question. So, and I'm looking at someone identified as K Mason 017.
They don't appear to be muted.
Did such a good job of raising your hand. You might want to type, if you can hear us, if you could type in the chat that you can hear
So
us.
we don't have a chat.
Anymore? Okay.
No, but maybe Jan could kick things off and read what they sent into the office, and maybe they need to do a little bit of troubleshooting with their microphone in the interim.
And they can always use a call-in number, correct, also?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead, Jan.
All right, I believe it's the same person. So the letter reads, "Good evening, my name is Katie Mason and I live next door at 43 Creeper Hill Road. I do have many concerns regarding the project at 45 Creeper Hill Road and have addressed some within this letter. I believe this lot was split off approximately in 1987. At this time, it was not developed with the other frontage lots, probably due to the wetlands and conditions that exist now. This hardship was self-inflicted at that time, and I am asking that the board stick by current wetland bylaws and grant no waivers to them. See below questions to both the board and the applicant. To the board. Number one, we noticed on the plan that the applicant references a 25-foot buffer zone. Is this a buffer zone or a no disturb zone? In the past, the board has had a 25-foot no disturb zone, and it is a true no disturb with either boulders or a fence placed along it with protection signage. This plan has neither and is noted that there is a 25-foot buffer zone, not a no disturb zone. And much of the work shown is inside this no disturb area. The driveway is located in the no disturb area, so it will be disturbed indefinitely. If this is approved by the board, it will set a precedent for future filings. Number two, is the applicant required to ask for a waiver for different locations or one waiver for the property? To the applicant. Number one, the plan map is indicating a flood elevation of 362. However, the FEMA maps indicate a different flood elevation. Did you do any calculations to determine the flood elevation? And if so, did you file for a map revision with FEMA? I am currently in the process of trying to get my house out of the floodplain, so I am not required to get flood insurance. And I am informed that the governing factor is the railroad bridge down gradient stream, which has an overflow elevation of 364. In order to establish this 362, you would need to file with FEMA and get the map revision prior to moving forward with this project, or show current FEMA floodplain lines on the plan. Number two, my driveway has a pipe under it to collect the water from the catch basin in Creeper Hill Road, which discharges out at the edge of my driveway, approximately 90 feet from wetland flag B8. Installing this driveway without a culvert under it will have significant water flow over the driveway at approximately elevation 362 and flow directly into the created storage area. Or a pipe could be installed under your driveway to discharge approximately 10 foot from a wetland, but something should be addressed, the runoff from the catch basin on Creeper Hill. Number three, did the applicant check with zoning for the driveway location? As I believe zoning rules require access over your own frontage in a 10-foot maintained landscape buffer along the property line. I understand this is a driveway easement. However, if zoning requires you to access over your legal frontage, this plan will not work. Number four, the driveway is 10 foot wide with a 10-foot drop off. Is there a shoulder or guardrail on the driveway? A 1-to-1 grade that is located 5 foot from a wetland is subject to erosion and future impact on protected wetland. It ends with, I will be in attendance of the meeting October 2nd if you have any questions. Thank you, Katie Mason.
All right, so
Can I actually interject? We have a new phone number caller, so if you want, I can try to promote that phone number. That might be them.
okay, go ahead.
Hello?
Oh, you got a little bit of an echo, which means your
Um,
other computer is picking up my voice.
Yeah, sorry. I have it on my computer and my phone as well, because I wasn't able to talk.
Not a
Not sure
problem.
why.
Yeah, if you could just real quick, give your name and address, and then we can start to talk about the letter you submitted.
Yep, my name is Katie Mason at 43 Creeper Hill Road.
Okay, so it's up to you how you would like to do this. We can just go through your letter and then you can add any comments on the end. Or if you'd like to, you can kind of introduce your letter and we can respond to each one of your questions.
I think that you read it out fine, so I'm happy to just come back at the end.
Okay.
And answer any questions that you guys have.
All right, great. So Jan, can you just start with the number one? You don't have to read the whole thing. Just give me the
Mhm.
highlight of it.
Let's see. Number one is working within the 25-foot buffer zone. Is it a buffer zone or a no disturb zone?
Okay. So yeah, so yes, it is a no disturb zone, and that is under the local wetlands protection bylaw. And that's enforced and there's, depending upon the site, depending upon the location, whether it's an existing or new property or whatever, it is, the applicant has the ability to submit and request a waiver from doing work in that area. Each waiver has to be looked at as an individual and looked at, based on the site that's being presented. So Leah, can you just bring up the plan again?
Yep.
So when we look at, one thing that you heard earlier is us talking about the 25-foot no disturb. It's incorrectly drawn on here. There is no question that there is, work being done both within the driveway area and within the side slope to the driveway. So again, that would require a waiver. And so as a commission goes, we always look at, what the waiver is for. I'll tell you, even though this is an individual, we do not set precedents because each one has its own merit on whether it's actually granted. There has been occasions when we have granted this waiver on different projects for different reasons. And for this one here, the reason would be is you need to be able to have access to your property. And so in this particular layout is that it's not possible to get to the buildable area without crossing that no disturb zone. But at the same time, when you get back further to the wetlands as it gets closer to the house, and that there'll be a 25-foot, no disturb zone. Yeah, it says buffer zone on here. That's incorrect. It is a no disturb. We will have a conversation with the applicant when we get to that point. That one, where is the limit of work line? Because we may want that, some sort of fence, boulders, or something else to protect whatever we can without the buffer zone. Yes, a lot of times it's along the 25-foot, but sometimes we actually even get a greater distance than that. And then as you go up to looking at this plan left and you get closer to the driveway, there's going to be certain areas that you may be within the 25-foot, and that's where we'll want to have the updated 25-foot no disturb zone on here so we can see just how much. One thing that is within that 25-foot no disturb zone is the compensation area for the floodplain. So, because that's water dependent is because it's dependent upon the location. It's dependent upon where that is. The applicant doesn't have a choice. It is unique to this property. And that would be another reason to consider, granting a waiver for work within the buffer zone. That is done through discussion with the commissioners, and then each commissioner get to vote on it and give their comments. That's kind of the process of it. We're not ready to have that vote yet because we need to have a corrected line. So does that answer that particular question? Did I miss something? And if you're talking, you're on mute. So Katie, I was just asking you if that first question.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, yes, that answered my question. Thank you.
And then Jan, the second question.
Is the applicant required to ask for waiver for different locations or one waiver for the property?
Since it's all in the same wetland system, we would ask for one waiver. That's what we've done in the past, Leah. We haven't requested multiple waivers for work.
Correct.
Okay. Next question, Jan?
Talking about the floodplain elevation at 362. The FEMA maps indicate a different flood elevation. Did you do any calculations to determine the flood elevation? And if so, did you file for a map revision with FEMA?
So, so Katie, if you were on earlier, you heard that discussion about the FEMA elevation is, you know, and you had mentioned that you're going for a map correction because you're trying to get out of the floodplain. The Conservation Commission does not set, you know, the requirements for flood insurance. We don't want to do anything that is going to change that. We can't. We have no jurisdiction over that. The flood elevation is really based on the jurisdiction of a particular resource area on the site. So whether or not, you know, this house falls within a flood zone or stuff, we're not going to make any rulings on that. And as far as getting flood insurance or anything else like that, that's up to whoever the potential homeowner. If this does get built, it's not us. We're not, you know, we would not have any comments on that. And as far as if they want to go to get a map update, that is something that we would not require anyone to do because it's, you know, it's not our jurisdiction. They're great questions, but we don't deal with the you know, the FEMA is all based on flood insurance and establishing areas where you have to have flood insurance. And so we don't have any kind of comments on that. It's not really our jurisdiction. And basically the elevation is based on the existing, on the existing contours actually surveyed on the property. And I think you heard earlier that we want to make it very clear in, you know, our findings that, you know, we're not determining a new flood elevation. It's only for the jurisdiction of this commission. Does that answer your question, or did I just really confuse you?
Yeah, I kind of understand your answer, but I'm just confused why there's its own elevation of 362 on the plan when FEMA, I feel like FEMA should be on the plan rather than its own made up 362 there.
So I'll go back to the applicant and have them go through the reasoning behind that particular elevation.
Yeah, so there were elevations for Flint Pond, which is actually located across the street up gradient from this. It was a letter of map revision using the 362 is the floodplain elevation for Flint Pond. This is downgrading of it. Hovey Pond's got a lower flood elevation, but we're using the highest known flood elevation to ensure that, you know, any work that's conducted on the site doesn't displace any you know, flood waters. So there's been a detailed study for a piece of property upgrading of the site, determined that the flood elevation was 362. So that's a conservative number we're using on this particular project.
So based on that information, and again, we're just applying it to this particular site, but it was a reasonable assertion based on the information that he has. And I would suggest that you also look at that floodplain map, you know, Loma or whatever they got on that map amendment, so that it might inform you on your site. But for this site here, we thought that was reasonable and conservative for this area.
Yes, I believe it was my engineer that did the 362 revision across the street.
Okay. So that's where that came from. It wasn't just picked out of the air. It was based on that information. Jan, number 3.
I
Okay.
agree with I
Oh.
agree, but I do believe, should he be showing the FEMA lines on the plan?
Yeah, it would, good question. I would say, Scott, you should show the FEMA line on the plan.
Okay.
May I
Alright.
say something?
Or you could
Sandy?
do a map revision.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Betsy.
I'm just saying that we're on one hand saying we're, things that are FEMA related, their FEMA maps are not in our jurisdiction. So does it create confusion when we're indicating them and people thinking that that is a requirement? I'm just saying it, in my mind, creates a point of confusion. We're either it's in our jurisdiction or it's not.
So the way we use a FEMA line is to determine a resource area.
Okay,
And that resource area is the land subject to flooding. So so the state regulations references FEMA for that.
okay,
And so what we have done is taken additional FEMA information from this other map change to show what the resource area.
got it.
Yes, it's confusing. Yes, it's, we're trying to do what meets the requirement of the Wetlands Protection Act based on the evidence that we get. But we're not going to be saying that that's the actual elevation.
Got it.
So, but it's,
Thank
yeah,
you.
no, it's a good question. It's not something that's super clear. And unfortunately, sometimes with the FEMA elevations, it can get a little confusing and so forth. So,
Thank you.
so Jan, next one.
All right, next one is regarding runoff from the catch basin on Creeper Hill. She said she has a culvert under her driveway and didn't see one on the plans and is concerned about runoff.
Sure. So Scott, do you want to show where or describe where the culvert is being proposed and how that will be mitigated?
Yeah, there's actually 2 cross culverts underneath the driveway proposed in the low area, so that any flow that comes down through that channel or across the 43 Creeper Hill Road site will drain to that low point, and then will be transported across the driveway through one or both of the 12-inch pipes that are proposed underneath the driveway. So we've accounted for any drainage from that site to ensure that it gets across the driveway.
And then that's just right where Leah's showing those pipes are there. Right there.
Correct.
Is there any pipes up further at the entrance of the driveway?
I'm not
I do
aware
have
of it.
I do have a 12-inch pipe going underneath my driveway at the top.
So yeah, so that's just off of this plan, but I was, Scott, asking if you had out by Creeper Hill Road, do you have a pipe underneath your driveway along the roadway?
No, there's no, it's a steep slope with I didn't observe any pipes or any flow paths or anything there. I think
Yeah,
if anything, things drain back towards, I think the low points essentially between the garage and the house of the abutting property, and it kind of sheet flows directly in between those down towards the flow path and the culverts. The proposed culverts.
yeah, you got a little bit of a low area when you look at Leah, if you can zoom into kind of the driveway at the property line where it has that. So when you look at elevation 370 and drops down to 367. And if you go right to the left of that, Leah, you have a little low spot right at where you're doing your fill right there.
Yeah, I'll look again, and if we need to install another pipe, we'll install.
Yep.
show
Yeah,
that.
I think the majority, I would agree with you. The majority of water coming from that abutter is going to go down to that low point. But just to make sure that you don't create anything else, you could, as it's a fill condition, you can just put a pipe in there. to
Yep.
avoid that.
I do have I
Go
do
ahead.
have a pipe under, I do have a pipe underneath the top of my driveway. So it goes from Creeper Hill and then it goes underneath my driveway. It's kind of hard to see. So you probably didn't see it when you were looking at the property. But there is a pipe up at the top of the driveway that goes across. So on the map, it would be like where those lines are.
Yeah, so if you can go to the top of the plan, Leah. So it doesn't show on this drawing here, but you're saying that you have a pipe up at that end,
Yeah, it would be right over there.
right where it says
No,
driveway.
like, no, not where the arrow, not where your fingerprint is, but like,
It's on your driveway.
it's in my driveway.
How
Yeah,
far down the
over there.
driveway?
Um, 370, 379.
Okay, so it's up near the top. Yeah. I look at the little bit of contours at 372 that kind of shows a little bit of a swale. I think where the contours are pinching together, I think that's where you're probably going to find your pipe. You know, it's just not
Yeah.
picked up on this plan.
I'll ask the engineer to look into that and add
Okay.
another pipe if needed.
All right, Jan, going on to the next question.
All right, the next one regards zoning with the driveway location and frontage with a 10-foot maintained landscape buffer along the property line.
Great question. At Conservation Commission, we're not going to answer that, but that is a great question. I don't know, Scott, if you want to do a very brief, if you've talked to the building department about that particular requirement and if you're required to get a variance.
I wasn't able to find anything regarding driveway requirements on the zoning, but I can certainly reach out to the building
Yeah.
inspector to find that out.
Yeah, so that's a great question. I would follow up with building and zoning just to make sure, because that's who's going to answer that question for you. All right, Jan, next one.
All right, last one. The driveway is 10-foot wide with a 10-foot drop off. Is there a shoulder or guardrail on the driveway? 1-to-1 grade that is located 5 feet from a wetland is subject to erosion.
So a couple of things. The question on erosion is the right question to ask. What is shown on this is those side slopes at 1-to-1 will have stone riprap. So that's fairly sizable, like 1 foot size rock that goes on. So when you look at this plan and you look at the entrance to the driveway, all that area, if Leah, you want to just kind of point towards it, it's kind of showing that hatch in that area. On both sides of it is all stone to prevent erosion at those locations. So that's intentionally done that way to prevent erosion. We will in our, if we get to the point where we're issuing an order, we will have other information about erosion control and things like that in our order of conditions. But does that answer that question there? And
Yes, it
then,
does. Thank you.
yeah, and then as far as the 10-foot wide, I mean, and a shoulder and so forth, it is a private driveway. We're not going to comment because it's really, that's more of a safety concern based upon the construction of it and whether or not there's any guardrails or shoulders or anything else. That's not something that we would comment on. And I don't even know if any other department, if the building department would like have a comment on that. 10-foot wide driveway is pretty standard. So I can tell you that conservation is not going to be commenting on the width of the roadway. We are concerned about the slope and we are concerned that it's stabilized. So those are definitely things underneath our jurisdiction, and those things we will definitely be, we've already asked questions. I asked about it further down on the driveway, that area there, if that was because it was a 2-to-1 slope, 1-to-1 slope. So those are the things that we are that we do look at, but the width of the driveway is not something, if it wasn't accessible or something, we might say, you know, you got to get to your house, but we're not going to comment on anything else. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, it answers my question. I just do feel like it is a safety issue.
Yeah, it's again, that's not really for us to kind of comment on. But it, you know, it's a good question. I don't know, Scott, if you have any response to that.
Looking at it, I think, you know, maybe worth just having my engineer add a guardrail on both sides of that driveway.
So. Jan, any others? There's another one.
No, that's it.
All right. So is there any other questions that you have? I mean, we're not going to be able to close this hearing tonight. But if you do have other questions, you know, especially anything to do with the wetlands, obviously, there's still some more information and a few plan revisions that we need to see before we get to the point where we deliberate and, you know, take a vote on this. So if you have any other questions now, please let us know, and always feel free to submit additional comments to us. Right.
I don't have anything further tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Yep. Leah, what are the things? Tree line label, stockpiling, you already said. Yep.
Yeah, you touched on all of them.
Okay. So I will go around to commissioners to do kind of a final check if there's any other questions or anything else that you want the applicant to kind of look at. So Alicia. Mute it.
Nope, I don't have anything.
I think that those words are "you're on mute" must be the most popular phrase in our world today. Jonathan,
Have anything else?
Betsy, anything else?
No, I'm good for now.
So kind of going back, Scott, as far as kind of summarizing all the things that we chatted about tonight so that you have a good list.
Yeah, I kind of numbered these. So you're looking for the detailed flood storage calculations in the backup on an 8.5 by 11, or kind of color coded. Add the riverfront area line, provide a detailed description regarding the lot age and the riverfront area regulations. Need a waiver and add the 25-foot no disturb zone and cut a check for $50 for that waiver. Remove the 25-foot no disturb off that flow path.
And add it to where there's a gap there, but you need to just correct it. Yep.
Yep. Add a tree line label, soil and stockpile area on the plans. Potentially look at and add another culvert in between on the driveway if there's a low spot to take any water that comes across the abutter's driveway, and then add a guardrail on the plan. And the other thing to kind of add is I'd be happy to meet with the abutter if there's concerns that can be addressed at this point. I'd be happy to meet with them and see if we can address anything that they may have.
That would be great, but that I would leave it up to you and the abutter if that's something they feel comfortable, they want to do that. That you know, obviously, absolutely free to do that. It might help to kind of resolve some of the issues and so forth. But having said that, obviously, as the applicant, you need to request a continuance before you do that. Leah, anything I miss?
Just when he was given the list, did we decide that the existing FEMA lines need to be on the plan as well?
I think just for completeness, it should be.
Okay.
And if you add a note onto the plan about the map change that you're referencing.
Okay. Perfect. And then I'd like to request a continuation to the next meeting, which I believe is the 16th. Is that correct?
Yeah, November 16th.
Yeah,
All right, that sounds good. Do I have a motion?
I make a motion to continue the hearing to the next meeting,
To the November 16th.
to the November 16th meeting.
All right, do I have a second?
I second the motion to continue to November 16th.
All right, I'll do a roll call vote on that. Alicia,
Yes.
Betsy,
Yes.
Jonathan.
Yes.
I am also a yes, the motion carries. So it'll just, we don't know what, it'll be just because it's continuance, it'll be whatever time is available for that. So,
Yeah.
all right, thanks. If you have any questions, any other further questions, please feel free to reach out to Leah or Jan at our office.
perfect. Thank you very much.
All right, have a good one.
You too.
Okay, we have no other action items?
Correct,
We have no other public hearings?
correct.
What is the one thing that we have left to do?
I make a motion to close the meeting.
Do I have a second?
I second the motion to adjourn the meeting.
Roll call vote. Jonathan,
Yes.
Alicia,
Yes.
Betsy,
Yes.
and I am also a yes, the motion carries. All right.
Thank